TSA agent rips up Black CEO's passport, not knowing she's the airline's new CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The sound of rolling suitcases and boarding calls filled Terminal 4 until it didn't. A sudden rip cut through the air like a gunshot. Every head turned. The TSA agent's voice thundered across the checkpoint. You think this passport is real? He held up what was left of it, shredded pages fluttering in his fists. Red cover torn clean in half. A gasp rolled through the line behind him. Someone raised a phone. Another whispered, "Oh my God." He didn't. Across from him stood a woman who hadn't moved an inch. Black hair, sharp bob. A tailored slate blue dress that caught the light. One hand rested lightly on her bag, the other across her chest, calm, composed, unbothered. Her passport lay in pieces at her heels. The agent leaned forward, face flushed, spit flying as he barked. You people think flashing a fancy bag makes you legit? I've seen this scam before. Quote. His badge gleamed in the sterile light. R. Miller, TSA led. Behind him, a younger officer froze mid-step, her hand hovering near her radio. The name tag on her chest read H. Soto. Her eyes darted between them, uneasy. The woman still hadn't spoken. The silence unnerved him more than shouting would have. Passengers shifted in the queue, phones rising one by one. Someone muttered, "Record this. He's losing it." Miller slammed a palm on the podium. "Answer me. Where'd you get this passport?" She tilted her head slightly, eyes level with his. Her voice was low, smooth, deliberate. "From the same place you got your attitude, the United States." The crowd reacted, a few soft laughs, a few gasps. Miller's jaw tightened. He pointed to the floor where the shredded pages lay. "That's not a valid document anymore. You're not flying today. Step aside before I call security." She didn't move. Didn't blink. Behind him, Officer Soto took a nervous step forward. "Sir, maybe we should recheck the system." Her name. "Stay out of it, Soto." The young officer flinched. The terminal quieted again. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve. Why's he yelling at her mom? The mother pulled him close. Because some people forget what respect is. The woman finally looked down, not at him, not at the torn passport, but at her reflection in the polished floor. Then she lifted her gaze, eyes steady, voice soft enough that only the nearest few could hear. "You just made a mistake you can't afford." Milaskoffel. "Is that a threat?" She smiled faintly. "No, a fact." The calm in her tone carried more weight than his shouting ever could. At the far end of the checkpoint, more travelers slowed, curious, phones angled higher. The murmurs turned into a hum, a collective awareness that something bigger than a routine inspection was unfolding. Soto shifted again, glancing at her handheld monitor. A gold tag flashed on the screen. VIP, executive clearance. Her breath caught. She looked at Miller. "Sir, her file says." He cut her off with a glare. "I said stay out of it." He turned back to the woman, now standing with arms folded, every inch of her radiating quiet defiance. Somewhere beyond the security lane, an intercom buzzed, announcing a boarding call. Flight 237, priority passengers now boarding. The irony wasn't lost on her. That was her flight, her airline, and in less than 10 minutes, the man tearing paper at her feet would find out just how high she could fly. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. For a moment, the terminal held its breath. She didn't lunge, didn't shout, didn't even bend to gather the shredded pieces of her passport. Instead, the Black CEO stood with her arms folded, posture long and still, as if the chaos in front of her had nothing to do with her at all. Travelers expected anger. What they got was poise. The woman's dress slate blue, sculpted, understated contrasted sharply against the TSA agent's red, furious face. Her bob cut framed her jaw like a blade. Every gesture, every breath, felt intentional. A couple near the stanchions whispered, "She looks like she owns the place." Not yet. Not in their eyes. But she would. Miller the agent kept pacing, chest rising fast, voice too loud for the early morning. "Ma'am, you're not flying today. You hear me? You're done." She raised one eyebrow, just one, the kind of look that said she'd been through far worse with far weaker men. Soto, the younger officer, took another hesitant step. She couldn't shake the gold tag she'd seen on her screen, the same gold tag only tied to executive-level airline access. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But fear kept her voice low. "Sir, we should really confirm." "Soto," Miller's voice cracked the air like a slap. "Back to your post. I'm handling this." Travelers flinched. Some murmured, "He's out of line." Another man muttered, "This'll be on TikTok by noon." She didn't look at the phones pointed her direction. Her eyes stayed on Miller. He stepped closer, invading her space. "What's your real name?" She inhaled slowly, as if tasting the question. "The one on the passport you destroyed." A few passengers snorted tiny, startled laughs that slipped out despite the tension. Miller didn't like that. He jabbed a finger toward her chest, stopping an inch short of touching her. "Don't get smart with me. If you think looking fancy is gonna save you, think again. We see this act every week." Her voice didn't rise. It lowered, quiet, steady, dangerous, like a calm tide returning to shore. "Honestly, I expected better from federal security screening." The words weren't loud, but the disappointment in them hit harder than any insult. Soto, still watching, felt her stomach twist. She'd joined TSA because she believed in the job in protecting people, not humiliating them. Watching this felt like failing a test no one warned her about. A family at the end of the line tried to usher their children away, but the kids clung to the rails, big-eyed, whispering questions. A business traveler in a gray suit shook his head. Phone raised. "He's done. This is career ending." But Miller heard none of it. He only saw a woman who, in his mind, had dared to stand tall. He pointed toward the holding area behind the scanners. "Step aside. Now. You can explain everything to airport security." Quote. She looked past him, toward the glass wall overlooking the runway. A jet with her airline's logo taxied toward a gate. The symbol shimmered in the morning light. The irony tasted sharp. She had walked into this airport alone, without entourage, without the armor of title or power. And in return, they had offered her a script she knew by heart. Suspicion, accusation, disrespect, served before proof. But she had learned over years of boardrooms and backhanded comments. Silence was not surrender. It was a weapon. Slowly, she shifted her LV bag on her shoulder. The movement was graceful, deliberate, a queen adjusting her crown before delivering a verdict. Then she spoke, soft, pointed, infinite. "You've shown me exactly how you treat people when you think they're powerless." She stepped forward, just enough for the crowd to feel the gravity of her presence. "And that is why I walked in like this today." Mela Blinkel. He didn't understand. Not yet. But the younger officer did. Soto's eyes widened, recognition creeping in, connecting dots she wasn't supposed to see. The CEO turned her head slightly, fixing her gaze directly on Miller. The line, the cameras, and whoever else thought they understood the hierarchy of that moment. "You judged the outfit. You judged the skin. But you never checked the name. Con." Phones in the crowd rose even higher. Someone whispered, "This is about to get good." The CEO closed her fingers around her phone, not fast, not dramatic, just final. "Ava," she said calmly, "get ready." And for the first time since the confrontation began, Miller hesitated. He felt the room shifting. He just didn't know why. Not yet. But he was about to. Very soon, the whole terminal would. The tension didn't rise all at once. It thickened slowly, inevitably like fog rolling across a runway, swallowing everything in its path. Miller's jaw flexed as he straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim the authority he felt slipping from him. "This ends now," he barked. "Ma'am, step aside for a secondary search. That's an order." His voice ricocheted off the glass walls, louder than protocol ever required. Travelers in other lanes paused mid-check, craning their necks toward the commotion. A few airport staff exchanged uneasy glances. The hum of the crowd grew louder. Phones lifted higher. The air tasted metallic, the flavor of impending conflict. The black CEO remained still, as if rooted to the polished floor. Her eyelids lowered half an inch, not in fear, but in calculation. She had entered the airport prepared for inconvenience, but not for this level of incompetence wrapped in ego. Still, she didn't break her composure. Soto, the young officer, stepped closer again, voice trembling. "Sir," her name matched an executive clearance. "I'm telling you, it popped up on my screen. I think we should." "Are you deaf, Soto?" Miller snapped, turning on her with a ferocity that made a couple in line flinch. "I said fall back." Soto swallowed hard. Her fingers tightened around her terminal, knuckles pale. A quiet realization settled behind her eyes. This wasn't about protocol anymore. This was about prejudice, dressed as procedure. A woman near the rope divider whispered harshly, "He's doing too much." She hasn't even raised her voice. A man next to her muttered, "Typical. Give someone a badge, and they think they're God." Someone else whispered, "She looks like she belongs in first class, not in trouble." But Miller fed off the attention, misreading the crowd's energy as support. He barked toward a nearby guard station. "Security, code 7 at gate via. Possible forged identification." Every word was wrong, every assumption was wrong, and every syllable pushed the story deeper into the jaws of humiliation. A uniformed airport security officer turned, assessing the situation with raised brows. He started walking over. The CEO exhaled once through her nose, a quiet, almost invisible release of pressure. She'd seen this before. At 23, she'd been pulled aside while traveling for a job interview, interrogated for an hour, because an agent didn't believe she could afford a business class seat. At 29, she'd been questioned about her real reason for travel, because her itinerary looked too ambitious. Every success she earned came with suspicion attached like a shadow. But today was different. Today, the shadow had chosen the wrong woman to stand over. She lifted her chin, gaze cutting clean through Miller. Not angry, not shaken, just profoundly unimpressed. "You escalated this," she said. "Over nothing." Miller scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Over nothing? Lady, you're holding a fake passport." He looked down at the shredded pieces on the floor and corrected himself with a smirk. "Well, you were." Hashtag hardened. Not loud, not violent, but sharp enough to draw blood. "You destroyed federal property without verification," she said calmly. "That alone is grounds for investigation." Miller laughed a short, ugly burst. "Investigation? Of what? You?" He stepped closer again, so close that Soto reflexively reached out, as if to stop him, then pulled her hand back, terrified of being ordered into silence again. The CEO didn't retreat even half an inch. "I'm not the one who should be worried," she said. The crowd murmured. Soto's eyes widened. Security took faster steps now, sensing something was off. Miller tried once more to regain command. He pointed to the floor, voice booming. "I said step acid. You don't belong here." The terminal froze. That sentence, the weight of it, the centuries packed into those 5 words. It reverberated through the space like a verdict. Phones trembled in people's hands. A woman near the back whispered, horrified, "He really said it." Even Miller seemed to feel he'd crossed some invisible line, but his pride kept him from retreating. The CEO lifted her eyes slowly. Her voice turned soft, so soft, the crowd had to lean in to hear it. "You're right," she said. "I don't belong in places run by people who think like you." She took one step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, simply reclaiming the space he tried to take. "But I do belong," she continued, "in the boardroom that signs your airline's checks." Miller blinked, confused, thrown off. A gust of uncertainty flickered across his face. The crowd reacted, little gasps, whispers, clicks of recording phones. Soto's breath caught. She'd known something was off. But this was a shift in the entire hierarchy of the terminal. Before Miller could process the gravity of what she had just implied, security arrived, and the atmosphere snapped tight, like a cable under strain. The rising tension had peaked. The fall was coming. He just didn't know it yet. Officer Soto had been trained to stay neutral, to follow commands, to defer to senior officers even when she disagreed. But nothing in her training prepared her for this. A line crossed so boldly, so loudly, that her body reacted before her mind did. Security arrived at the checkpoint. 2 officers in Navy uniforms, hands resting on their utility belts. The older one, Officer Grant, scanned the area with the caution of someone who had walked into too many messy situations. "What seems to be the issue?" He asked it neutrally, but the tension in the room answered for him. Miller stepped forward before anyone else could speak, puffed up like a man who believed reinforcements guaranteed victory. "We've got a suspected fraud case," he declared. "Fake passport, fake identity, refusal to comply. She destroyed her own documents after we confronted her." A ripple of disbelief passed through the crowd. The CEO's brow lifted. Not a full reaction, just a clean, surgical arc of disbelief. Officer Grant turned toward her. "Ma'am, is that accurate?" Before she could answer, a voice behind them broke the standoff. A clear voice. A steady voice. A voice that shouldn't have held authority but did. "Sir, that's not what happened." Heads turned. Soto stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't. She looked straight at Grant, not at Miller, not at the phones, not at the CEO, at authority. "I saw her name come up on the system." She swallowed. It wasn't flagged as fraud. It was flagged as VIP executive access. The crowd gasped. That was the first crack. Miller spun toward her, face flushing pure red. "Soto, what are you doing?" She didn't back down. Didn't fold. Didn't fade. Telling the truth. 3 simple words. They hit the terminal like a dropped hammer. "Mila Bagel, you're misreading the system. You always misread the system." But Soto held her ground. For the first time, her shoulders squared. Her voice didn't shake. "No, sir. I saw the tag. It said Airline Executive. Gold override clearance." Grant turned sharply toward Miller. Something in his posture tightened. The CEO watched quietly, almost studying the moment, the way courage sometimes rises, not from power, but from conscience. Soto continued, louder this time. She didn't refuse anything. She handed over her passport. She answered every question. "And?" Her breath shook, but only once. "You're the one who tore it up." Phones rose higher. A few people whispered, "Good for her." Others murmured, "Finally someone says it." Miller's composure cracked. "Soto, that's enough." "No," she said. It was the first time she'd ever spoken that word to a superior. "No, sir, it's not enough. Because you didn't just question her. You humiliated her." Grant folded his arms. "I need to verify that statement. Did he destroy the passport?" The CEO didn't speak. Instead, she slowly lowered her gaze to the floor, where the shredded red cover lay like fallen leaves. "Soto didn't hesitate." He ripped it in half. He yelled at her. He mocked her. She looked at the CEO. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a verdict. "Mila sputa?" "She's lying. She's covering." "For who?" The CEO interrupted softly. Her voice slid into the silence like a blade. "For me? Or for the truth?" Even Grant posed. The CEO took one step forward, small, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "I watched you tear up a document you didn't bother verifying. I watched you shout at a woman who stayed calm while you unraveled. And now," her eyes drifted to Soto, "I'm watching someone brave enough to speak up." Soto stiffened, not expecting the acknowledgement. Grant exhaled deeply. "Ma'am, I think we need to restart this entire interaction. Away from this area." Miller pushed past him, desperate. "She doesn't get to walk away. You don't know who she is." The CEO finally turned her full focus on him. A quiet stare heavy as a sentence. "You're right," she said. "You don't know who I am." Then she looked at Soto. "But she does." She was the only one who bothered to check. Soto straightened, pride flickering behind her nerves. Miller shook with fury he couldn't name anywhere useful. "This is insanity. She's manipulating all of you." The CEO lifted her phone. One tap. No rush. No fear. "Ava," she said calmly, "lock in what Officer Soto just witnessed. Timestamp it. A beat. A. Digital Scheme. Logged, Ava replied through the speaker. Protocol sequence ready, ma'am. The room froze. For the first time, Miller's confidence wavered, because he finally realized this wasn't a woman bluffing. This was a woman preparing. And the witness who dared to speak up had just changed the direction of the entire airport. The downfall was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. Officer Grant's presence should have calmed things down. It didn't. If anything, the air thickened thicker than body heat, and stress and humiliation combined. Miller's face was a storm barely contained. Being contradicted by a junior officer? Being challenged in front of a crowd? His authority, the one thing he clung to harder than truth, was slipping between his fingers. And he felt it. Everyone shut those phones off. His scream cracked the space open like lightning. Nobody moved. Dozens of phones stayed pointed at him, red recording dots burning like tiny judgmental eyes. He snapped, bending down. He scooped up the shredded passport from the floor, crumpled pieces of red and white, the remnants of a document he had no right to destroy. He held them up, shaking them in her face. This is what fraud looks like. The CEO didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't step back. Her stillness only made him angrier. He threw the shredded pages back onto the floor. They scattered across the tiles, landing near her heels like discarded dignity. A collective gasp rippled through the line. A woman near the back whispered, "Oh no, he just went too far." Soto whispered too, but hers was a whisper of terror. "Sir, please stop." He didn't hear her, or didn't want to. He stepped closer, too close. Close enough that the CEO could smell the bitterness in his breath. Close enough that Grant reached out instinctively, unsure if he'd need to restrain him. Then came the sentence that tore open every wound she had ever carried. "People like you never belong in first class." The crowd froze, phones trembled, and for one long second, the airport wasn't an airport anymore. It was every boarding gate that had once doubted her, every business lounge that had eyed her twice, every meeting where she'd been mistaken for an assistant instead of the one leading the merger. The flashback hit not like a memory, but like a ghost brushing cold fingers across her spine. Age 16, Charlotte Airport, Sunday shoes, holding a ticket her parents saved months to buy. A man in uniform telling her she didn't look like a premium traveler, escorting her out of the boarding lane while other passengers stared. Years later, older, sharper, more successful, she passed through Heathrow wearing a tailored suit. And still, an agent had looked at her and said, "Is this really your reservation? Or did someone book it for you?" These moments didn't break her. They built her, but they also marked her. And now, standing in Terminal 4 with shredded passport pieces at her feet, she felt that same cold echo of the past, except this time, she wasn't a teenager or a junior associate. She was the woman who had bought the very airline about to depart from this terminal. Her voice returned slowly, rising from memory into present. Soft, deadly, controlled. "You don't get to talk to me like that. Milasnia." "Why? Because you think you're special?" She took one step forward. Her shadow crossed his shoes. "No," she said. "Because you crossed a line that even your badge can't protect." Grant raised a hand. "Okay, that's enough. Miller, step back." But Miller wasn't listening. Rage had turned him blind. He reached out and grabbed her arm, hard, fingers digging in. Gasps exploded through the terminal. "Sir, stop," Soto cried. Grant lunged forward. Phones jerked up. A child screamed. And the CEO? She didn't pull away. She didn't fight. She simply looked down at his hand like it was an insect that had mistaken her for a surface. It had permission to touch. Then she lifted her phone slow, deliberate. "Ava," she said calmly. "Escalate protocol." A digital scheme answered. "Escalation confirmed, ma'am." Somewhere in the terminal, security systems shifted. Screens flickered. A quiet alarm hummed beneath the floor, subtle, but unmistakably real. And the entire room understood. This wasn't a retaliation. This was the beginning of justice. The alarm wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. It thrummed beneath the floor like a pulse, subtle, steady, unmistakably authoritative. The kind of sound only a few people in the entire airport would even recognize. The kind of sound Miller absolutely did not understand. But she did. And so did Ava. The CEO didn't yank her arm free, didn't shove him, didn't react the way he hoped with panic or anger or fear. She simply turned her wrist, just enough for his grip to slide off like it never belonged there in the first place. Her voice stayed level, almost gentle, terrifyingly calm. Let go. He hesitated, not out of respect, but confusion, and that was all the time she needed to step out of his reach, reclaiming her space without ever raising a hand. Grant grabbed Miller by the shoulder. Agent Miller, that's Anu. But Miller yanked free, wild-eyed, spitting rage. You don't get it. She's manipulating all of you. She triggered something in the system. That alarm, the CEO cut him off with a quiet sentence that froze him in place. That alarm responds to me, not you. Gasps rippled through the line again. Even Grant faltered. Soto stared, breath held. Travelers clutched their phones tighter, capturing the moment the narrative shifted slowly, inexorably away from Miller's control. The CEO raised her phone. One tap, a soft confirmation tone. Ava, confirm, override status. A beat. Then Ava's voice came through, crisp, efficient, unmistakably official. Override acknowledged. Airline security notified. All systems ready for executive command. Executive. That word hit the terminal like a shockwave. Grant's eyes widened. Soto's jaw parted. A man in the crowd whispered, "Executive? Wait, what kind?" The CEO didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she stepped forward, letting the silence shape itself around her like a cloak. "Agent Miller," she said, tone low and razor clean. "Before this goes further, I want to give you one last opportunity to correct your behavior." He scoffed, actually scoffed, a dry, humorless puff of disbelief. "You think you're giving me an opportunity?" She didn't blink. "Yes, because after this moment, the consequences won't come from me." Grant cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Ma'am, we need to de-escalate. If you have a supervisor, we can contact." She turned her head slowly toward him. Not rude, not aggressive, just letting him see the truth in her eyes. "You've already contacted them." Grant froze. Soto whispered, barely audible, "Oh my God, she's someone important." The CEO lowered her phone. Her voice softened the way a warning softens before it becomes law. "My name is on your airline's internal network. My clearance is embedded in your system, Condu, and my authority outranks everyone in this terminal." Miller barked a laugh, high, shaky, desperate. "You're bluffing. If you were anyone important, you'd have said so from the start." She stepped closer. Just one step. Enough that he felt her presence like a shadow rising. Powerful people don't announce themselves. They observe. They test. Then her final words hit with the force of a verdict. "And you just failed the test." Kai. Right on cue. The main security screen behind the checkpoint flickered, then shifted into executive mode. A gold seal appeared. A name appeared. Her name. The crowd erupted. Soto covered her mouth. Grant staggered back a step, Miller's face drained of color, horror filling every corner where arrogance once lived. And the CEO? She simply watched him, calm, steady, unshakably in command. The turn wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was complete. The gold seal on the monitor didn't just glow. It owned the room. Every conversation in the terminal died mid-breath. Every phone locked its focus. Every witness leaned in, because there, in luminous executive gold, the system displayed Airline corporate access. Carter, Nia, Chief Executive Officer. Her name, Hetzel. Her authority, laid bare for the entire terminal to see. Miller's lips parted. No sound came out. His brain tried to catch up, but the truth hit him faster than shame could form. "See, CEO," he choked. That can't be real." But it was real. And the room knew it. Soto, trembling but wide-eyed with vindication, whispered, "I told you the tag was executive." Grant exhaled slow, a man realizing he'd stepped into a hurricane he wasn't trained for. "Ma'am, you're the head of the airline?" She didn't boast. Didn't smirk. Didn't raise her chin like someone expecting applause. She simply nodded once. A subtle, devastating confirmation. Then she stepped into the center of the checkpoint, not to escalate, but to take her rightful place in the story he tried to write her out of. The phones followed her like spotlights. Her voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice made for boardrooms and battlefields. "Agent Miller," she began. "You called me a fraud." She paused, letting the words echo across the terminal tiles. "In the airline I run." Quote. A collective gasp burst from the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh my God. Someone else muttered, he's finished." She wasn't done. "You tore up my passport." Her eyes lowered for a fraction of a second to the pieces on the floor. "Without verification. You accused me of using a stolen identity." Her gaze flicked to the glowing gold badge on the screen. "When the identity you denied is the one you answer to." Miller staggered back a step. The color drained from his face as the reality sharpened. He hadn't just mistreated a passenger. He had humiliated his own CEO in public, on camera, on record, on a dozen live streams. She closed the distance between them with calm, purposeful steps. Not intimidation, not dominance, just truth walking toward the man who tried to erase it. "You asked who I thought I was," she said. "You demanded I prove my worth to you." Gum. She leaned in slightly, not enough to invade, but enough that he couldn't look away. "But the only person who needed to justify their behavior, a beat, was you?" A shudder moved through the crowd, the sound people make when justice finally hits bone. Miller finally found a sliver of voice. You should have told us who you were." Her laugh was soft, not cruel, not mocking, just tired of excuses. Power doesn't need to announce itself. Respect shouldn't depend on a resume. Close cut. And dignity, she held his stare, is not something I should have to earn from you. Soto swallowed hard, her voice breaking through. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything soon enough." The CEO turned to her gently. "You spoke when it mattered. That's what counts." And then, just when the room thought the reveal had peaked, the security monitors shifted again. A message scrolled across them in bold. "Executive priority, CEO present on site. Initiating internal review protocol." Every badge in the immediate area buzzed red. Grant stiffened. Soto gasped. Miller stared at his badge like it was detonating. "And the CEO?" She stepped back, giving the room a view of the woman behind the title. Calm, composed, absolutely in command. "Now," she said softly, "let's talk about consequences." The reveal was complete, and justice was about to land. The terminal didn't erupt, it imploded. Quiet first, then sharp, then absolute. Badges buzzed red across the checkpoint. Not one, not two. All of them. Beep, beep, beep. A chorus of access denial. Grant looked down at his chest as his badge vibrated, flashing restricted. He froze. Soto's eyes widened as hers did the same. But Miller, his badge didn't just buzz, it screamed. A long, piercing tone meant for disciplinary lockouts. His hand shot to silence it, but it kept blaring. Red light pulsing like a warning siren strapped to his pride. What's happening?" he stammered. The CEO didn't raise her voice. "Internal review protocol," she said simply. "Triggered by misconduct. Every action you took is now being audited in real time." Grant straightened, suddenly deferential. "Ma'am, what do you need us to do?" She nodded toward the red badges. "Step back. The system is handling the verification." And they did. Even Grant. Even the officers who moments earlier thought they were in control. Only Miller stayed frozen, shaking his badge as if the hardware itself might deny the truth. Then a second alert flashed across the main security monitor. "Agent Miller access suspended. Please surrender badge immediately." The crowd gasped. Phones surged forward like a tide. "No, this is a mistake," he choked. You don't have authority over TSA." She stepped closer, her presence forcing him to meet the truth. "I have authority over the airline you serve, and the entire terminal is under joint jurisdiction today because of a federal review, which means," she gestured to the flashing screen, "your behavior is legally documented and automatically escalated." Miller's knees almost buckled. Grant approached him slowly. "Not aggressive, just resigned." "Give me your badge," he said quietly. "Now." Miller backed it away. No, I didn't do anything wrong. She provoked me. He pointed a trembling finger at the CEO. "She did this on purpose." He tilted. "Yes," she said. "I came here to catch my flight." not to catch you." The crowd reacted with a collective "oa," the kind that ripples when arrogance finally meets consequence. Grant reached again. This time, Miller didn't resist. He let the badge fall into the officer's hand like a confession. Silence settled over the crowd, the kind of silence that follows justice, not violence. The CEO looked at him one last time. "You didn't lose your job today because of me," she said. "You lost it because you couldn't treat a passenger like a human being." Her words landed with surgical precision. Then, with a final beep, the terminal system confirmed. Agent Miller removed from duty, and the collapse was complete. The checkpoint was silent now, not the silence of fear, but the silence that follows a storm finally breaking. Passengers lowered their phones, but none stopped recording. No one wanted to miss the moment this woman, this calm, uncompromising CEO, closed the chapter she never asked to open. Officer Grant stepped back, badge surrendered, posture respectful, in a way he wished he'd shown earlier. Soto stood near the CEO, shoulders squared, a quiet bravery radiating from her like new light. And Mila? He stood with empty hands and an emptier expression, watching everything he built on ego crumble at his feet. The CEO stepped forward, not to attack, not to boast, but to speak to the entire terminal, to every witness, every bystander, every viewer watching through a shaky phone screen. Her voice was soft, but the kind of soft that carries farther than a shout. "I want you all to remember something," she began. "He never raised my voice." Eyes locked onto her. People leaned in. Even the airport music seemed to lower its volume. Yet the truth was louder than anything he said. Quote. She glanced down at the shredded passport, still lying on the floor, the symbol of every assumption they tried to place on her. This wasn't about a document, or a line at security. Her gaze lifted again. This was about how easily some people believe they can decide who belongs and who doesn't. A woman in the crowd nodded, eyes glistening. A man whispered, "Say it again." She continued, "Every system, TSA, corporate, federal, is built to protect people, not to humiliate them, not to diminish them." Her tone sharpened, not in anger, but in clarity. And today, those systems worked, not because of power, she looked at Soto, but because someone chose courage. Soto's breath hitched. A few people clapped small at first, then spreading like sparks across dry ground. The CEO stepped once more toward the center of the checkpoint. Dignity isn't a request. It isn't an upgrade. It isn't a privilege you earn from someone holding a badge. Quote. She paused long enough for the weight to settle. Dignity is the starting point. A wave of applause swept through the terminal, not wild, not chaotic, but steady, purposeful, grateful. She bent down, picked up the largest piece of her shredded passport, and held it between two fingers. "He tore this," she said quietly. "But he didn't tear me." Gasps, phones shaking, people whispering, "That's the line. That's the one." Quote. She looked directly at Miller, one last time, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the cold truth of someone who had outgrown every room she once felt unwelcome in. "You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake." Then she turned toward Soto and Grant. "I'll file my full report with federal oversight. For now, reopen the lane. These people have flights to catch." Grant nodded immediately. Soto stepped forward to reset the checkpoint, and as the CEO walked through the metal detector, calm, elegant, untouchable, the entire terminal stepped aside, giving her space like a runway clearing for takeoff. Because in that moment, everyone understood. She wasn't just boarding a flight. She was rewriting the standard for how justice lands.